It sounds like that place physically sucks the life out of you and isn't fit for a dog. Can you explain the physical and mental stresses?
It's very difficult to explain to anyone what it's really like mentally, because whilst the whole indecisiveness is going on as to what you've been charged or going to be charged with or what you've been accused with, you've got an endless succession of people, police officers, media, paparazzi, plainclothes police, security guards, coming to you and trying to scam you in one way or another, whether it be to get you water or whether it be to get you food or offer you cigarettes, or you're just treated as a commodity. You're not treated as a human being at all.
Do you want to talk about the whole corruption gig in Bali? What happened to you, step by step?
Yeah, the selling began as soon as I was arrested. The customs official in the airport that made a number of statements to the police was selling me to the paparazzi, letting them in to come and take photographs and photograph the evidence. The whole thing was just a complete circus. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. When I got to Polder police station the next day, they paraded in an ambulance chasing lawyer who trumpeted that he was an expert in these drug importation matters, and he was there and he was going to fix everything. He targeted my wallet straight away. By the time the day was out, he'd emptied the $3,000 out of that, and that was to secure the release of my stepson, who was also illegally arrested at the same time I was. And my thoughts were firstly with him, to get him out of the situation, and that cost me $3,000. He handed me a document saying that if I paid $105,000 US, that he'd have me get me a sentence of 1 year or less. And this is on the first day, and I hadn't even been charged with anything. And I was absolutely astonished to what was going on. The head of the police drug squad shoved the new drug codes in front of me and pointed out the worst possible charge, which was importation, with a minimum of 5 years and a maximum of 15 years sentence for the quantity that they were claiming that I'd brought in, and told me, if you don't stop denying it, you're going to get the same treatment as Corby. And the lawyers repeated that to me time and again, and over the next few days I realised that no amount of evidence to the contrary was going to make any difference. I was never going to get a fair trial, and it was a matter of paying money to get out of there. And that was the scenario right from the beginning. On the way to the prison, who was transporting me along with the police had stated that if I wanted my own cell, I'd have to pay 10 million rupiah. And I wasn't quite sure what he was getting at, in that if you didn't get your own cell, what you were going to get. So I knew it was another con, but we stopped at a bank on the way, and I used the credit card and drew out the 10 million rupiah and gave him the cash. When we got to the prison, there was a lot of toing and froing, and I found out later that was people from the front office and the back office demanding money and so on and so forth to process me in a hurry.
What corruption occurred while you were at Kirikaban with your case?
Well, again, it would take me a long time to put it, but in a nutshell, I knew I had to get. I asked around everybody that I could get that would listen, where I could get some sort of lawyer that's not going to rip me off, that is going to get me out of there, and the name kept popping up. My investigations revealed that he was a very connected man, and connected to the Balinese mafia, which run the parking administration across Bali, and also connected to Pasar. So I had a meeting with him, and he again demanded over $100,000 US to get my release. But at least I from what he'd stated and what I'd found out about this person, I knew that at least this he was going to do what he was going to be paid to do, rather than who many of the prisoners in Karabakan had warned me as soon as I got there that I need to get rid of him because he'd ripped them off for huge amounts of money and not done what he told them he was going to do. So I hired and I began raising funds, and I negotiated with him that I couldn't pay $105,000, and I was able to negotiate down to $65,000 US. The scams just continued right throughout my time there, and the uncertainty continues right up until your final court case. And I went to court 6 times, and trying to avoid the scams all that time and keep your nose clean, not talk to the media, not talk about the scams, because you're warned if you say anything about it, it'll all go against you. So you just have to play this whole pantomime the whole time that you're there. And I'm not talking about myself. Every Westerner that came in there while I was there, and every Westerner that was there while I was there, were all involved in this same typical pantomime of pretending this and pretending that, and meanwhile raising money and paying the lawyers through the back door.
Can you tell us more about the corruption in their legal system and the rip-offs?
Well, the corruption is so endemic that it can be predicted how much you're going to pay, what judges and what prosecutors are going to get paid, and any of the pitfalls along the way are all well known by all the prisoners inside the prison, both the Indonesians and the Westerners. So in light of that, I guess it was some assistance to sort of talking to other prisoners and being able to telegraph ahead of time what attempts were going to be made to scam me, and what threats were going to be made to me, and how the pantomime was all going to play out in court. So that each time I got to court on all the 6 occasions, I knew exactly what the media were going to do. I knew exactly what the judges and the prosecutor were going to do and say. The whole thing was ridiculous. Anything else at all that you want to expose? There's lots, but I guess that'll all come out down the track, how the Australian government are in collusion with all of this.
Could you tell us about the 2010 video and explain what that was about we've just previously had a look at?
Yeah, well, that was a part one of an extract from part one of a 3-part series of videos that I volunteered for the Expendable Project in support of Schapelle Corby. And the Expendable Project, of course, have a big website, expendable.tv, where they've got a litany of evidence showing the collusion and corruption between the Indonesians and the Australian government, especially in Bali and especially in the Bali court system. Back then in 2010, we opted to block out the names of these corrupt lawyers and police because the object was not to upset the Indonesians too much, or they may in turn around and victimise Schapelle Corby. So it was a very, very delicate sort of situation at that time. But of course now that things have moved on, and we've now got 2 reformed men facing a firing squad who never got a fair trial, well, it's time now to release the names and all the evidence.
Well, how did the Australian Consulate behave in the situation with you back in 2010?
Right, well, when I was arrested and taken to Polar Police Station with my stepson Joshua, who was 21 at the time, just turned 21, the Bali Consul General came down, and it was actually the 2IC. I won't give up his name just yet, and he was trying to be helpful. And this was shortly after having the first blackmail attempt from Andrew Ruckmud and the police chief Kokot Indato. And whilst Joshua was in the room with me, I said to this gentleman from the Bali Consul General, that they've just attempted to blackmail me for $100,000 US. And straight off the cuff, he turned around to me in front of my stepson and said, "Oh, we can't know about those things." And so I got the gist of it straight away that I was pretty well on my own, and the only thing the Bali Consul General were really going to be able to do was try and ensure that the conditions were met under the United Nations Human Rights Act.
Right.
But they were really struggling to achieve that.
Yes, well, it sounds to me,
Yes.
what were the options that they offered you? It sounds like they had a menu of some description, and you did mention to me previously that there was some new drug code.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I didn't know anything about the drug code because I didn't know anything about the drugs that had been planted in my suitcase by the AFP in Perth. And the police chief, Kokot Indato, shoved the new drug code in front of me while he had his mate there, the ambulance chasing lawyer, Andrew Ruckmud, and was pointing down the list of the various charges, and they were saying, well, if you get this charge, you're looking at 5 to 15 years. If you get this charge, you're looking at 5 to 20 years, and this charge, you could get the death penalty. And with that, Andrew Ruckmud turned around and handed me a piece of paper, and he had all the same charges listed in a menu format, and the price that he wanted to get you off those charges.
Really?
And,
well, why was he at the police station? Where does this fall into line?
Well, exactly, that's right. He was just paraded in out of the blue. And then it turned out, of course, he was a good mate of the police chief. And when I got to the prison later, as I explained in the earlier video, everybody, just about every Westerner in the prison, had been exposed to this Andrew Ruckmud at some stage or another, and most of them have been ripped off by him. And it was absolutely unbelievable. They had this so brazen and so blatant that they were prepared to type it onto a piece of paper like a restaurant menu, and shove it in front of you and say, well, if you pay this much, that's how much sentence you're going to get. So you're buying your sentence off a menu. Outrageous.
Well, can you explain to us about the bill that you received for your jail cell?
Yeah. Well, as I explained in the video, on the way to the jail cell, there's Andrew Ruckmud saying, you need your own cell, you're a sick man, rah, rah, rah. And I said, well, yeah, I don't want to be put into another cell with a bunch of chain-smoking Indonesians and where I'm dehydrating and end up with blood poisoning. And he said, well, I can get you your own cell, but will cost 10 million rupiah. And as I explained, well, I knew it was a scam, but we pulled up at an ATM and I pulled out 10 million rupiah from a credit card and I handed him that. And later on, after I'd sacked him, I saw his aide coming into the prison, into the visiting area, and I went up to her and said, look, I want a receipt for that 10 million rupiah. And she knew what I was talking about because she was in the car with me when we stopped at the ATM. In fact, she was actually standing next to me at the ATM when I pulled the money out. And I said to her, I want a receipt. If I don't get a receipt, I'm going to blow the whistle because I don't believe that 10 million rupiah went to anybody except into his pocket. And lo and behold, she brought that receipt that you can see there now with me. Now, just getting back to the previous subject of this menu business, later on, after I'd sacked Andrew Ruckmud and employed Sudiantara, Neumann Sudiantara, the Bali gangster, he also had a similar prospectus where he was telling me that, well, if you pay me $105,000 US, I'll get you out of here in under 2 months. We'll call you an addict, and the sentence for the PASAL, the PASAL, which is the charge, the sentence for the charge that he was pointing to, and I think it was 126.1, but don't quote me on that at this point, I don't have the PASAL in front of me, was the sentence for that, for being an addict, was up to 4 months. That's like from 0 to 4 months. Not many people had been charged under this because this was the new drug code, part of the new drug code also. But he was demanding $105,000 US. Now this guy at that time held the record for getting people out of that prison. I think the record was 26 days, and it had been achieved by that lawyer. Now, no Westerner gets out of that prison in 26 days. Whoever that person was must have paid a lot of money. Now, so, as I pointed out in the video, I couldn't raise $105,000. So, they started saying, well, all right, well, we'll have to charge you with this charge then. And the next charge was still related to being addicted, and the sentence was up to 2 years, I think from memory. So you could get any sentence that was under 2 years off that charge, and so on and so forth. And that's what ended up happening. I was taken and charged eventually with a whole bunch of charges. They put them all in there. They put the serious ones in there, as well as the lighter charges. So the game was, they had you cornered, and as you pay the money and you play their game, they'll start dropping the charges off. And that's exactly what happened. As the money was getting paid through the back door, they were dropping charges. Absolutely outrageous.
So we have the documentation of the ANZ Bank transactions, and also your stepson Josh's transactions in February 2010. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yes, what Josh was doing was sending my money directly to Sudiantara. And he began doing that in early February just with a couple of small transactions to make sure the SWIFT codes were working rather than sending $10,000 straight up. It might get lost in the system. So he did 2 transactions that you can see there, a day apart of $100 each, to see if they turned up. And then you'll see there's a gap of a couple of weeks or a few weeks before the next one, because I then had to go to Wayanana, the go-between, the interpreter, and tell him, look, Josh has made some transactions. You need to tell us that you've received them so we know it's working before we start sending the real money. And now, just prior to that happening, the Sudiantara was pressuring me to start sending the money. This must have been late January. And I said, okay, and of course, they're allowing me to have a phone in my jail cell because it's part of the scam, because they know you've got to arrange money. So they don't clamp down on your phone. In fact, the whole 5 months I was in Caribbean prison, my jail cell was never searched, not even once. Plenty of others there were searched, but I never got searched. I was a protected species because I was a commodity, and they didn't want to upset me or interfere in the gathering of the funds. Now, so they pressured me to start sending money. So, okay, but they hadn't given me a bank account yet. Now, Sudiantara told me, in the one meeting I had with him personally at Caribbean prison, told me that he'll give me a bank account details of a third party to send the funds into. Well, I straight away twigged what that was all about. Of course, it keeps it all out of his name and into an independent third party, just in case things get out of hand and people start getting accused of doing blackmail and bribes. He could turn around and say, well, I never got paid any money. And so, I was prepared to go along with whatever game they had because I was cornered. I had no choice. It's blackmail and bribery, and they're holding long jail sentences over your head. So then, of course, as I mentioned, they started pressuring me to start sending the money, but they hadn't given me a bank account yet. So I contacted the office of Udistira and told them, I need to speak to the interpreter. We weren't allowed to say too much over the phone because it was assumed that the phones were being tapped by the AFP or the Bali police, and which I later found out they were. And so they sent the go-between out to the prison to talk to me, and I said, well, where's the bank account? You've asked me to start sending money. We're ready to start sending it, but you haven't given me the bank account. And because Wayanana goes, well, Mr. Neumann is very busy. The municipal elections are on, and he's assisting the mayor in his election campaign. And I'll let him know what you've said, and I'll get back to you. Then, lo and behold, within a couple of days, he comes back out of the prison with another message and whispers in my ear and in the visiting room, Mr. Robert, as he used to call me, Mr. Robert, Neumann trusts you. He's going to give you his bank account details. So I thought, well, this is handy. Now I've got this fish. If he double crosses me, I'll be able to blow the whistle on him and tries to run away with the money without getting me out of jail. I'll be able to at least blow the whistle on him. And that's how it went. So from that point on, we were paying the money directly into this gangster's bank account because he was too busy with the municipal elections to provide me the third-party bank account.
Or cover his backside. It wasn't happening.
Yes. It's either that or he couldn't find a third party that he could trust enough to be involved in it. And it was really becoming quite a pantomime and outrageous. So Josh continues sending the money, and my supporters in Australia were putting the hat around and raising the funds, and we managed to send him $68,000 or over $68,000 as detailed in there. Now, the next thing that happened just after Josh started sending the money in early February was I had to go and be formally charged back at the police station. And the Indonesians are sticklers for paperwork, and they don't like coming out to the prison and doing business. They like to do business in their own environment. So they sent the two junior police officers out to Kerabakan prison who were actually processing my case. And these were the two guys who were actually at the computer desks, were actually doing the actual work. Not the senior police who were getting the bribes and performing all the stunts. These guys were just the lowly paid police officers and were looking for whatever graft that they might be able to get their hands on. Now, the interpreter told me that they were coming, of course, and to be ready to be picked up at the prison. And he said to me, Mr. Robert, you know, the customary thing is that you take them out to lunch. And I thought, oh, well, here we go. Here's another stunt. Whatever. I said, yes. Well, how do you feel? I said, yeah, no worries. They want to go to lunch. Well, I haven't had a decent meal since I've been here, so whatever. Yeah, okay, we'll take them out to lunch. It can't cost me that much in Bali, surely. So, lo and behold, these two coppers picked me up at the prison. They signed the documents to take me away, and I've got no handcuffs on or anything. I'm just dressed in casual clothes. And they're saying, well, where would we like to go for lunch? And I said, well, I haven't had any decent seafood since I've been here, and I really like seafood. So then we find ourselves in the Baruna Sunset Restaurant at Kuta. So here I am buying these two coppers lunch, and they're wearing plain clothes. And I'm there wearing plain clothes, free as a bird, no handcuffs, and I'm drinking beer at the table with them. And it was all like we're all best mates, you know, and they're just having general conversations, you know, what I do with my kids at home and what they do with their kids at home and, you know, what interests we have playing golf or whatever. And it was just unbelievable. I mean, I could have just packed up and ran out into the street and run away anytime I wanted. And obviously, but then you're going to get a big beating or whatever if they catch you, or maybe even a bullet in the back. So I kept that receipt, and that was on the 23rd of February 2010. When I paid for the meals for the three of us and the beer and the bottle of beer, I kept the receipt, as you can see there. Now, on that same day, I was also told that, you know, we're ready to put the legal aid claim in. And the legal aid claim went like this. I told Neumann, Sudi and Tara that I cannot raise $105,000. It's as simple as that. So we need to negotiate. So he came down the list and like the old menu again, pointing to the charges. Well, look, if you can raise $80,000 US, I'll get you out in under 6 months. We'll use this charge. And I said, well, you know, I don't think I can even raise $80,000 US, but I'll put in a legal aid claim, and I might be able to top it up with that. And he said, well, all right. If you can raise the $80,000 US by whatever means, I'll get you out of the prison in under 6 months. So that was the final deal that we struck. And on the 23rd of February, that same day, the cops took me to lunch in Denpasar and in Kuta, and then around to the police office to be formally charged. They also took me over to the Bali Consul General's office to deliver the legal aid claim. And the legal aid claim, as you can see there that I provided, was initially for $44,000, because you don't put something in low and then try and increase it. Obviously, like anything, you put in high and allow it to be reduced. Now, miraculously, as we now know, that claim, well, firstly, let me point out, $68,000 Australian, which is what we eventually raised and sent to Neumann, Sudi and Tara to pay the blackmail and bribes. To convert that into $80,000 US at the conversion rate at that time in early 2010, which the Australian dollar was down a bit in those days, probably down around where it is now or even lower. At that time, to add to the $68,000 US, Australian, and make that come out to $80,000 US, I would need another $24,000 Australian. Now, miraculously, when the legal aid claim was approved and came back, and as you can see in the approval letter there, it was $24,000 right on the money. And I don't think that the officers working for the Attorney General in Canberra have got mind-reading capabilities. I am absolutely convinced that they were talking to Neumann, Sudi and Tara behind the scenes. And,
so just before we go any further there, Rob, for our viewers, we've got a situation now where you've paid him, what was $68,000, was it?
Yes, well, at the time the claim went in, he'd only been paid $200.
Right.
Two separate $100 transactions.
Right.
But by the time the claim was approved, it was already worked out how much money I was going to be able to raise. And that money was going to be in the vicinity of $70,000.
So what we have here is the $70,000 going into his personal account, your lawyer's personal account, and an application into the Australian government for legal representation that he's going to provide to you, and that money was transferred from the Australian government to him.
Yes, well, I can't say for sure that it was, and this is why. Okay, when I was finally released, well, firstly, let me point out this. There were 6 court hearings. At the second last hearing, just when it was already pretty much decided what my sentence was going to be, as I pointed out in the earlier video, Neumann, Sudi and Tara came up to me at the holding cells outside the district court in Denpasar and had one last-ditch effort to try and get cash out of me, and come up to me and said, look, Robert, I'm not sure about this legal aid claim that they'll ever pay it. I really need cash. Can you get me another $20,000 Australian? And I was devastated by this stage. I was already suffering severe post-traumatic stress disorder and had no sleep basically for 4 months, worrying whether we were ever going to raise the money to pay these bribes. And I had to look at him in the eyes and say, listen, Neumann, I've begged, borrowed and stolen every cent that I can get. I am flat broke. I cannot get you one more cent. You have to trust me that you will be paid the legal aid money. And when I get home, I'll make sure that you get paid. And of course, that was a great big lie. I had no intention of ever enforcing that. And in fact, I did the opposite. The minute I stepped off the plane in Perth, or the following day, I contacted the Attorney General's office by email and demanded that they do not pay this lawyer any money because they've just ripped off myself and my family for $68,000 in blackmail payments, and I want the invoice that I know that he sent. Now, before I go on with what happened with the Attorney General, and you've got the emails there, that email exchange that you're putting up for the world to see, how they went into panic mode, but just after I got my sentence in Bali on the last day, I was then taken across to the administration building again and asked to sign some final documents about my sentence and trial and so on and so forth, all in Indonesian, of course. I had no idea what I was signing. I'd only take the word of the interpreter that it was all right. But then the YN Anna, the go-between, pulled out an invoice that Yudhishthira Association had prepared to go to the Attorney General's office to claim the $24,000 that had been approved. And the invoice was all itemised, almost identically, well, pretty much identically to that what's in the letter of approval from the Attorney General's office, which was copied to Sudiantara anyway, and it all comes out miraculously to exactly $24,000. Now, any normal thinking person would know that that's sus. I mean, at the very least, it should have been a couple of dollars here or there. So it's all done in reverse, of course. Now, YN Anna flips through the pages of that invoice in front of me. He said, "Robert, I want you to look at this and check it that we've done it correctly." And I was looking over his shoulder, and he's flipping through the pages of the invoice, and I'm going, well, you know, whatever, looks all right to me, you know, whatever. Now, at the back page of that invoice was a statutory declaration, a Commonwealth statutory declaration, signed by Neumann Sudiantara, saying that he had not been paid any money.
Rob, do you know Julian McMahon, who's representing Australians over there, lawyer?
Oh, yes, yes, I know Julian McMahon. He was coming into the visiting area, and the 5 months I was there, dealing with the Bali 9, and a little bit to do with Chappelle Corby, I think, from memory. But I had a few conversations with him face to face in the visiting area there, and I sort of had mixed feelings about what he was doing, and you know, and the reputation that he had earned himself through the Corby case and Bali 9s. A lot of Australians there had mixed feelings about the guy as well. Some thought he was okay, others didn't like him at all. Now, he is being portrayed in the media as doing all of this out of charity. Well, my first-hand knowledge is that that's not true. He's being paid by the taxpayers through the Australian government to go over there and be a part of these legal teams. So he's making a living out of it. Now, after I was released and I was having these communications with the Attorney General about the bribery and blackmail and the false claim for legal aid, I copied Julian McMahon into some of those emails. And he eventually wrote back to me, and this is what he said: "Robert, I have just had a chance to read some of your recent emails. Neumann Sudiantara is mentioned in your email. I have worked with him and found him to be a good and reputable lawyer, and accordingly it is not appropriate for you to copy me into any more such matters." Now, here we have Julian McMahon, who's livid and bucking because I've exposed Neumann Sudiantara as the corrupt gangster that he is to the Attorney General. And here he is rushing to his defence. So I guess the bottom line is Julian McMahon is a part of the Bali judicial corruption.
Seems that way, doesn't it?
And here it is in his own words. Yes. So what chance have those two boys got of surviving with a lawyer like that? I guess there's a double-edged sword there. Perhaps it might be handy for Julian McMahon to have the inroads into the corruption. Perhaps he can go and pay some bribes and save these guys' lives. Who knows? But I fear that if their lives are left in the hands of Julian McMahon, these boys will be executed. Okay, now, So getting back now to when I got home. So when I got home and I had the email exchange with the Attorney General's office telling them don't pay these gangsters any money, so on and so forth, I then called for the invoice. Initially, they tried to resist and have email exchanges of that. So I threatened them. Well, I didn't threaten. I actually sent a letter requesting it under the Freedom of Information Act. The Attorney General's office then wrote back to me and said, oh, Mr. McJanet, we've got no problem giving you the invoice. Here it is. And they emailed me a PDF file of the Udistira invoice. But miraculously, of course, the statutory declaration has been removed from the back page. Now, I then contacted the Attorney General's office again and said, listen, I know that there was a statutory declaration attached to the back of this invoice. I saw it myself sitting on the desk in an office in Denpasar. Where is it? And at that point, all communication ceased. A couple of days later, my computer was hacked and about 1,000 emails went missing out of my computer. I soon worked out that I'd been hacked, and fortunately, I'd done a major backup of my data only 2 days earlier and was able to retrieve most of the emails that went missing. Then wrote to the Attorney General's office again and told them, well, your ASIO hackers have failed. I still have copies of our email exchange. And some of those emails that were stolen are the emails that we're now producing as evidence. Following that, and of course all communication still ceased, they didn't want to talk about this anymore. I beg your pardon, there was one communication they did. They called for proof that this money had been paid. And it was in quite a nonchalant way that they requested, have you got proof of all of this, Mr. McJanet? And of course what they were expecting was that I was going to come back with a third-party bank account. Because they know, the Canberra knows what's going on in Bali. They know full well they're a part of it. But when I came back to them and said, well, actually, yes, I do have evidence of all the money going directly into Neumann Sudi and Tara's bank account. Here's the transaction records. Well, of course, it was at that point they cut off communications and hacked my computer and so on and so forth. But they've never communicated with me ever since about this issue. But what I have had is victimisation for the past 5 years from every government department known to man, interference with my tax affairs, interference with my child support affairs, and unrelenting multiple trumped-up criminal charges that I've had to go and defeat. They've attacked my career and my employment through the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Western Australia. Came up to my first job in the Colgar Wind Farm near Merredin, Western Australia, where I was operating cranes, minding my own business, trying to get my life back on track, and deliberately disparaged me to my employers, produced emails and newspaper reports from Bali and told them I had to go and get drug tested and so on and so forth until they destroyed that job. And I had to sue people for defamation to get them off my back. And there's just no aspect of my life, of my private life, of my children that hasn't been and still is being interfered with by Commonwealth and state governments.
Rob, where are you going to from here, mate?
Well, the persecution's continuing. It's been relentless, and they're stepping it right up. It's just coincidental that it happens to be stepping up right at the time against me, right at the time when they're looking at putting a bullet in Andrew's hand. I'm sure they want me to stay right out of it, so they're keeping me tied up with a whole lot of vexatious allegations while they go and shoot Andrew.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they're heading for cover with the information we're putting up here, let alone the plethora of stuff you've got out there we haven't touched yet.
Well, as I said in my speech at Perth Airport, my address to the media at Perth Airport on the 30th of May, after my release from Karabakan, there's no way in hell that any Australian has ever had a fair trial in that Bali justice system. And that includes Andrew Chan and Myron Sukumaran.
Yeah.
And of course, a lawyer has recently, a previous lawyer of Andrew Chan and Myron has recently touched on the subject that they were enticed to pay money to reduce the sentence.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to make an important point on the type of sentencing in Bali, as far as the major drug importation goes. Now, those two guys were potentially exporting heroin from Bali to Australia, even though Andrew Chan had no drugs on him whatsoever, and I'm not sure about Myron. I believe he may not have had any on him either. They were just hauled off aeroplanes and they were dobbed in by the rest of the ring as being the ringleaders, or so it goes, something like that. Now, they got death sentences. Whilst I was in prison, numerous Iranians were arrested for importing methamphetamines into Bali from somewhere else in the world. There were several different groups of them were caught, and others also caught in Jakarta with the same thing, methamphetamine, pure crystal meth they had inside their bodies, which they were going to the toilet after they arrive and getting out of their body, passing through their bowels. Now, there was 8 of those Iranians in Karabakan prison. Not one of them received a death penalty. They all received sentences from between 12 and 18 years. And yet, they were bringing methamphetamines into Indonesia. Now, when Joko Widodo carries on about the drug problem in Indonesia, and the media talk about the drug problem in Indonesia, I can tell you from first-hand knowledge that they are actually referring to the methamphetamine problem. The drug problem in Indonesia is predominantly with methamphetamines, or shabu-shabu as they call it. So yet when they catch Iranian Muslims coming into their country with kilograms and kilograms, and multiple people, not just a couple, of methamphetamines, they don't get a death penalty, they get years. And when an Australian gets caught exporting heroin, which is not their drug problem in Indonesia, and to go to Australia to create problems in Australia, they get the death penalty. So go figure.
All right, Rob. Thank you very much.
No worries, Harry. Good talking to you, and let's hope we save their lives.
All right.
And stop the rot.
Thanks, Rob.